I was 19 when this happened, living in my first apartment. It was a basement unit in an old house, the kind with small windows near the ceiling that let in just enough light to make the place feel perpetually gloomy. My roommate Sarah had gone home for Thanksgiving weekend, and I'd decided to stay behind to pick up extra shifts at the restaurant where I worked. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly grad students and young professionals. I felt safe enough, even though the landlord had mentioned that the previous tenant left suddenly without much explanation. I didn't think much of it at the time. That Friday night, I got home around midnight, exhausted from a double shift. I made myself some ramen and settled onto the couch with my laptop to watch Netflix. About halfway through an episode, I heard it, a soft scraping sound coming from the far bedroom, the one we used for storage, since neither of us wanted a room without a proper window. I paused the show and listened. Nothing. I convinced myself it was pipes or the people upstairs moving furniture. I hit play again. 10 minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was unmistakable, the sound of something being dragged across the floor. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my phone, ready to dial 911, but then I thought about how stupid I'd feel if it was just the radiator or settling foundation. The landlord already thought I was a nervous tenant after I'd called him twice about weird smells. I crept toward the hallway, my phone clutched in my hand with 911 typed in, but not sent. The storage room door was slightly ajar. I absolutely knew, that Sarah and I had closed it before she left. We always did because the hinges squeaked and it would swing open randomly, which creeped us both out. I pushed the door open with my foot, my thumb hovering over the call button. The room looked normal, boxes stacked against the walls, Sarah's bike, my old textbooks, but the small window near the ceiling was open, not just unlocked, fully open, and we never opened that window. It was painted shut when we moved in. That's when I saw the shoe print on top of one of the boxes, a large boot print in the dust right beneath the window. Someone had been in here, maybe was still in here. I didn't wait to investigate. I ran out of the apartment, not even bothering to grab my coat, and sprinted up the stairs to the main house. I pounded on the landlord's door until he answered, confused and annoyed in his bathrobe. When I explained, his face changed completely. He told me to wait there and went back inside, returning with a baseball bat. We went down together. He searched every corner, every closet, behind every stack of boxes. Nothing. But he didn't dismiss me. He looked at that boot print for a long time, then checked the window. "This was definitely forced open recently," he said quietly. "The paint's fresh broken." He called the police. They came, took photos, dusted for prints. They found evidence that someone had used a crowbar on the window. The officer told me that basement apartments were particularly vulnerable, especially ones with windows that opened to secluded side yards like ours did. What really got me, though, was what the landlord told me after the police left. The previous tenant? She'd called him multiple times, claiming someone was getting into the apartment. He'd checked but never found anything, thought she was paranoid. She moved out after she woke up one night and found muddy footprints leading from that storage room to her bedroom door. I broke my lease the next day. I don't care what it cost me. When I was 15, my family rented a cabin in the mountains for a week during summer vacation. It was supposed to be this peaceful getaway, hiking, fishing, roasting marshmallows. The cabin was beautiful, all wood beams and big windows overlooking the forest, but it was isolated. The nearest neighbor was over a mile away. On the third night, my parents decided to drive into town for dinner at a restaurant they'd heard about. They asked if my little sister Emma and I wanted to come, but we'd just gotten to a really intense part of the book we were reading together, and wanted to keep going. My parents were hesitant, but I convinced them we'd be fine. I was responsible. I babysat all the time back home. They agreed but made me promise to lock all the doors and not open them for anyone. "We'll be back in 2 hours, Max," my dad said. "Keep your phone on." For the first hour, everything was perfect. Emma and I read our book, made popcorn, played cards on the floor. It was getting dark outside, and the forest sounds were getting louder. Crickets, wind in the trees, the occasional animal rustling in the underbrush. Then Emma asked, "Did Mom and Dad say they'd come back through the front door or the back door?" "The front," I said. "Why?" "Because I just heard the back door open." My blood went cold. I told her she probably heard the wind, but she insisted. "No, I heard the lock click and the door creak, like when we first got here and the hinges were stiff." I made her stay in the living room while I walked through the cabin. My hands were shaking. The back door was closed and locked, just like we'd left it. I checked every window, every other door, all secure. When I came back, Emma was standing at the big picture window that faced the woods, staring out into the darkness. "There's someone out there," she whispered. At first, I didn't see anything, just trees and shadows, but then, about 50 feet from the house, I saw movement, a figure standing between two pine trees, completely motionless, facing the cabin. "Go to the bathroom," I told Emma, trying to keep my voice steady. "Lock the door and don't come out until I get you." She started crying, but she went. I grabbed my phone and called my parents. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. They were probably in a dead zone. I tried again. Nothing. I called 911. The dispatcher answered and I explained where we were and what was happening. She stayed on the line with me, saying officers were on their way, but it would take at least 20 minutes given our location. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. I turned off all the lights so whoever was outside couldn't see in, then crouched below the window and peeked out. The figure was gone. My heart hammered even harder. Where did they go? Then I heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps on the wooden deck that wrapped around the cabin. They were circling the house. The footsteps stopped at the front door. I watched the handle turn slowly, testing to see if it was locked. It was. The person tried the door again, pushing harder this time. The door rattled in its frame. I was about to scream when headlights swept across the front of the cabin, my parents' car. The person on the deck must have seen them too, because I heard rapid footsteps, running this time, and then nothing. My parents found me crouched by the door, shaking, still on the phone with the dispatcher. Emma was still locked in the bathroom. The police arrived 10 minutes later and searched the property. They found boot prints on the deck and cigarette butts near where the figure had been standing in the woods, like someone had been watching the cabin for a while. The officer said it was probably just someone who thought the cabin was empty, but I knew better. They'd seen us through the windows. They'd waited until they thought we were alone. We packed up and left that night, didn't even stay for the rest of the week we'd paid for. I still have nightmares about that door handle turning. This happened when I was working as a night janitor at an office building during college. It was just me and one security guard, Marcus, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. The building was 12 stories, mostly tech companies and law firms, completely empty at night except for us. I'd been working there for about 3 months when things started feeling off. Small things at first. Doors I'd locked would be unlocked when I came back to a floor. Lights would be on in offices I'd already cleaned. I mentioned it to Marcus, but he said old buildings were like that. Electrical issues, doors not latching properly. Then one night, I was cleaning the 8th floor, vacuuming the cubicles with my headphones in. I'd gotten into a rhythm, moving row by row when I happened to glance up at the dark window of one of the private offices. Someone was standing inside it, just standing there, watching me. I screamed and yanked out my headphones, my heart exploding in my chest. I stared at the office window, but now I couldn't see anyone. The lights were off in there. Maybe I'd imagined it, just my own reflection or something. But I didn't imagine the way my skin was crawling. I radioed Marcus and asked him to come up to the 8th floor. He arrived a few minutes later, annoyed at being pulled away from his desk. "What's going on?" he asked. "I thought I saw someone in that office," I said, pointing. He tried the door. Locked. He used his master key and we went inside together. Empty. No one in the closet, no one under the desk. Nothing. "You're working too hard," Marcus said. Take your break early, get some coffee. I nodded and left, feeling stupid, but as we walked back to the elevator, I noticed something. In the office across the hall, the one with the door slightly open, there was a coffee cup on the desk that hadn't been there when I'd cleaned that floor earlier, and it was still warm. I pointed it out to Marcus. His expression changed. He got on his radio and called for backup. Apparently there was a second guard who stayed in the parking garage. Then he told me to wait by the elevators while he checked the floor more thoroughly. I stood there, for what felt like forever, watching him go office to office. Then I heard running footsteps from the stairwell, rapid, heavy footsteps going down. Marcus heard it too and sprinted toward the stairs, yelling at me to lock myself in the security office on the ground floor. I ran for the elevator, punching the button over and over. When it finally came, I practically fell inside and slammed the lobby button. Marcus found evidence that someone had been camping out in the building for at least a week. They'd been using an empty office on the 9th floor, sleeping there at night, using the bathroom and kitchen facilities. They'd stolen a security card from someone's desk and had been coming and going as they pleased. The police caught him 2 days later trying to get back into the building. He'd been homeless and had figured out that the building's security was lax enough that he could live there undetected, but he'd been watching me work, following me floor to floor some nights. I quit the next week. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of him standing in that dark office just staring at me while I vacuumed 10 feet away, completely oblivious. Some people ask why I didn't notice him sooner, but that's the thing about big empty buildings at night. You're so focused on getting your work done that you don't notice what's happening in the shadows around you, not until it's almost too late. Is on tungs for se aya, per se in nayas.